Avatar: The Last Airbender. Considered by many one of the best animated shows ever made, and even one of the best TV shows, with everyone praising it in websites like IMDb or social media. And I think you can tell from the title that I'm disagree. Now hold on. Before going into comment section and start defending it, let me clarify a few things. And before you're asking, yes, I'm lazy enough to don't read them, but creating a video long enough for, yeah, you get the idea. Anyway, did you get all of that? Good. So now we are going to create the World War III. It's obvious that Avatar used anime structure for its story, and not only a story. The art style, exaggerated facial expressions, its comedy, eastern setting, team of heroes slowly growing bigger, an ultimate set goal, i.e. defeating Ozai and stopping the war. It even has two brief beach scenes that many anime, especially shonen anime, have. Not all of these traits were first used in shonen anime, but all of them are present in both Avatar and most shonen anime. Now you might be wondering why I say shonen anime and not only anime, which you might not be if you are an anime fan, a weeb, but let me explain it a little. Although before explaining everything, I should say that I don't give a shit if Avatar is considered an anime or not. It technically is somehow shonen anime in its story structure and even some of its themes. See, even though shonen is the most popular genre in anime, it is only one of its genres. In the same way that you can't find that many similarities between Psycho-Pass and Dragon Ball, you can't find that many similarities between Avatar and many anime like, I don't know, Promised Neverland or Welcome to NHK. So I'm gonna criticize Avatar as a shonen anime, a battle shonen anime to be precise. And before that, we need to know what are the common problems with shonen anime. Most of the time, shonen protagonists are kind-hearted teenagers with goofy personality and they like to have fun.
Will you go penguin sledding with me?
They care about their friends and want to protect them, and most of them have a predetermined goal and they are often opposed to killing. Not all of the shonen protagonists share these traits, but like I said, most of them do. And well, I think all of you can see where this is going. Aang has many of these similarities with shonen protagonists, and that is somehow the problem number one. See, shonen anime are often criticized for having protagonists that are too similar to other shonen protagonists. Because when half of the personality traits that your protagonist has is so common, your protagonist becomes less of an original character and more the same cliche kind boy with a strong will that we have seen so many times. Before you go down in the comment section and start arguing, I should say that Aang is actually one of the better shonen protagonists that I have seen. Sure, he is goofy, kind and pacifist, but his role as the bridge between nations and cultures and somehow a human god makes him more distinguishable than the typical shonen kind guy. But that unfortunately doesn't solve all of the problems here. See, most of Aang's traits that make him distinguishable from other shonen protagonists are traits that are directly or indirectly connected to his role as the Avatar, not his personality as a person. And Aang isn't just the Avatar. He is a person too. And if we are going to explore his personality, we find too many cliche traits that make him more and more undistinguishable. And when you consider that if you place another shonen protagonist, for example Tanjiro or Naruto, in Aang's position, and the story is going to progress almost in the same way that the original story did, with the least amount of important changes, you understand what I mean by undistinguishable. Some character and personality traits are usually used for the protagonists in almost all of the story types you might find. Wanting to protect those who you love isn't a trait that you can say can become cliche, because it's something that every human being has. Everyone has something.
Hello there.
Well, I mean, most people have something they care about, therefore they want to protect it. That in itself isn't a problem. The way that this trait is used can become a cliche because, for example, both gods and Tanjiro have the goal of protecting the people who they love. The difference is that Guts goes through a lot of things and faces many doubts and then becomes a grown, tired man with the goal of protection, and Tanjiro is the kind, protective dude in the first place. That's what I mean by saying that the way that character traits are used can become very cliche, because the amount of protagonists who want to protect in the first place and from the moment they were born doesn't come up to just one or two. You can find many examples for this. Unlike what many people think that the most important aspect of a battle shonen is long fights, shonen anime often have so much drama in a unique way. See, when you create a fantasy setting with magical powers in it, you need to create emotional scenes and drama different than shows that take place in real life, which means you can create something new that most of the normal people didn't experience. In theory. It is exactly because you can create different kind of emotional scenes and drama that fantasy has become such a well-known and popular genre, and unfortunately many of the ways that it creates its emotional scenes are now so common that you might see one type of dramatized scene over and over and over in shonen anime. Although many other fantasy stories have such problems, but considering that we are talking about anime here, then we don't actually give a shit about other media in this video. For example, the infamous villain's backstory being revealed in the last minutes, often with flashbacks, is one type of this cheap drama, or giving the viewer a one-arc villain that is only present in one arc and using them for creating drama, which sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, for various reasons. And surprisingly, Avatar doesn't do this that much. Most of the episodic villains have solid backstory and good plot twists for their episodes, and we don't get a stupid flashbacks in the last minute. So you might ask, Sclane, why the fuck you even mention this part at all? Because I said it doesn't do this that much. I didn't say it doesn't do this at all. Unfortunately, it used last minute justification for the most important villains, which I will explain in more detail in later sections. And unfortunately, it is just half of the problem with drama in Avatar. In the villains part, I think Avatar did a better job compared to the average shonen anime, but in good characters parts, I think it is as bad and even sometimes inferior to many shonen anime. Now let me explain. If we just look at average shonen anime runtime, we can see that they often have many episodes or many chapters for the manga. And yes, it's true that a high amount of shonen's screen time is used for long battles and Avatar's fights are much shorter, but the fact that they still have more time to develop relationships between characters doesn't change. Mathematically, you have more time for developing Ichigo and Rukia's relationship in almost 17 episodes before the first main story arc, which is Soul Society, than the relationship between Sokka and Yue in just 3 episodes. And that's the real problem I have with Avatar's drama. At least I have gotten used to villain cliches in shonen anime, but this part isn't something that I can get used to. I don't know what it's like in your country, but in my country we don't consider a girl that we met a few days ago our first girlfriend or something, unless we are in elementary school. Everything about Yue happens just so fast, and by the end of the last episode, what I feel isn't sadness. The problem is that I know the writers wanted the audience to be sad, and I know that I should feel sad, but I can't. Considering that I came to know a character named Yue exists 2 episodes ago, and these 2 episodes were not even fully committed to Sokka and Yue. Those 2 were just a small part of episode 18 and 19. And the problem isn't just Yue. Characters like Suki only have a very limited screen time. Suki is only present in 1 episode in book 1 and 2 episodes in book 2, which isn't enough to create a deep romantic relationship between 2 characters. Although I admit it, I like Sokka's trauma for Yue's death, but that's another topic. One of the reasons that Iroh and Zuko's relationship is so great is that it was developed from the first season. When you think of them, you can remember many different scenes, and actually too many different scenes that played a role in their character arc. The comedy parts, the solo parts, and sad parts, and more.
Maybe they'll give you the wisdom to win this battle.
Or maybe they'll unleash a crazy amazing spirit attack on the Fire Nation. Or wisdom, that's good too.
Which was depicted as the stupid option in episode 19. For the record, I'm not going to nitpick anything. And what I say is a nitpicking, at least in my opinion. I don't care how financial soldiers get their butt kicked like this and they are still alive, other than Avatar's demographic and target audience being kids, or how a frozen frog doesn't have a hole in its stomach when it is shot by an arrow, and how this guy doesn't die. But that's just nonsense and something that doesn't matter at all. It doesn't change the course of the story, and the kids show obviously can't have people killed like hell in it, or show blood and that kind of stuff. It's understandable, justifiable, and more importantly, it doesn't matter. My problems are some things like this.
Are you deaf? How can I teach you if you refuse to listen? The earth is steady and stable, but fire is alive. Without the bender, a rock will not throw itself. That is its destiny. You are not ready. You are too weak.
Jung's speech is great, but why Roku says Aang needs to learn firebending now?
You think I am weak? I have mastered the elements 1,000 times in 1,000 lifetimes. You will teach the Avatar firebending.
I think Roku more than anyone else in the show knows that learning bending needs time and you need to do them in order, I guess. The problem is what Jung says about fire's nature is so logical that no sane person can deny. Why Roku, a wise man, should suggest something so logical? If Jung could foresee that it's too soon for Aang to learn firebending, then how Roku couldn't understand? We just have a dreamlike scene with Roku. He doesn't even give us any real reason for what he says. That really doesn't make sense for me, especially when we just get a "how dare you oppose me, you stupid mongrel, I have experienced these things
1,000 times in 1,000 lifetimes."
It reminds me of Gilgamesh, which isn't a wise man. There are many more obvious plot holes that many other people have already talked about. For example, this guy who lies to Aang about Ozai being in the chamber when Toph is there. Toph being so overpowered and blind at the same time creates some problems. For example, how she can hit Fire Nation troops on a ship she can't sense any vibrations from. Another ship, it's another ship. But at least something like this doesn't change the course of the story. But something like Jung teaching Aang, and Aang and others being tricked on the day of the Black Sun, really changes the course of the story. Or other example being that why didn't Dai Li hide Avatar's existence from Elf King 2? Or maybe it's the logical choice to stop shitting all over the place when your boss is telling you he's willing to pay double. Well, I would have accepted that.
I'm powerless. You've got your swords. Why don't you just do it now?
Because I know my own destiny. Taking you down is the Avatar's destiny. Goodbye.
Or I would have wanted something other than bullshits like destiny for such actions. There are some memes about Batman syndrome, which the protagonists don't have parents, but it's not that important as some other cliches. For example, Katara's revenge story comes to a very cliche conclusion, in my opinion. I don't have any problem with people really believing that every human being deserves to live, even if they are total scumbags. Examples being Mikia Kokuto from Kara no Kyukai, Himura Kenshin from Rurouni Kenshin, Kenzo Tenma from The Monster. But why I don't have any problem with these people don't wanting to kill others? You said because they are created in Japan?
Wrong!
Because it's explored and explained in the whole show. It's one of the main themes. But in Avatar, the conclusion is the same cliche bullshit of you don't worth killing and you really are a scumbag, but I won't kill you because I would have no difference with you. It makes the viewer completely sure that the writers just used this cliche twice because they thought it's not appropriate for kids to see heroes killing bad guys. It seems you can't do that in a kids show, it seems. I don't live in US. I don't know. So just don't add such parts in the show, okay? Simple. Don't add something that you don't have the talent to explore and explain properly, or you can't explore and explain. Or do you only have the he doesn't worth killing and I would be the same as you?
I just can't do it.
Well, that's not called a logical reason in my dictionary. But let me use this too. And I just can't accept this. Does that sound convincing? The same problem is present with Ozai. You can't just show us a picture of Ozai when he was a baby and expect us to accept that Aang is justified to don't kill him because you didn't have established a character for Ozai at all, and even didn't thought about how you are going to let him stay alive. So you pulled out that lion turtle thing from your ass. Not only the writers suddenly throw a second option in the last episodes, but they just tell us that, see this cute baby, Ozai was a human once. Dudes, I know people are not Hitler or something when they just come out of their mother's womb in hospital or something. You can't justify it with that. I've heard many times the counter argument of Ozai is just a means to an end, but the writers have already proven that they can give their villains a bit more depth. Something other than the generic heartless dictator who wants to dominate the earth. Jet is an anti-hero who arguably can be considered a utilitarian, or maybe he just doesn't give a shit about anyone who was born in a foreign nation, i.e. racist, which is worse than being a utilitarian in my opinion because it isn't even based on any logic, but he is still a solid anti-hero for one episode. We'll talk about his appearance in book 2 a bit later, or other examples like Sozen, even Hama. Sozen, who wanted to share the prosperity of his kingdom with others but over time became a ruthless man who even destroyed the culture, fucking genocide. But he was Roku's friend, and although he didn't get much screen time and even his motivation was told only in a flashback scene, but still for the time that was given to him he was an acceptable character. But unfortunately we don't have any reason for Ozai's life being spared. It's in the last minute that they remember, oops, we portrayed him much worse than any other character in the whole show. What are we gonna do? It's a kids show. Just add a baby picture. No one will complain. Please have plans before starting the show. At least for the important parts. Please. The funny thing is that it seems even Gyatso has killed people before. These dudes didn't die out of nothing. I can tell you that.
This goes against everything I learned from the monks.
God save me. How other monks can defend themselves and kill Fire Nation soldiers, and you say it goes against their teachings? That doesn't make any sense. Even that Airbender avatar, who I forgot her name, says that don't killing is one of the monks' teachings.
Yes, all life is sacred.
And I've certainly never used it to take a life.
Avatar Aang, I know that you're a gentle spirit, and the monks have taught you well.
Am I the only one who thinks it's stupid and contradictory? And I think I need to clarify that you sometimes need characters that their motivation for doing things that hurts others is just power, money, or even just being an asshole. But I won't accept making them the main villain of the story. Well, mostly you still can make a pure evil asshole a deep and complex character. But if you can't, then just make them a plot tool at best, a plot device character, It's simple. Don't use them as important antagonists. It takes away the depth. Avatar is already a good versus bad show. At least add layer and depth to it. For example, a Star Wars original trilogy did this with making the most important antagonist connected to the other characters in an interesting way, and gave him understandable and relatable backstories, so you will most likely like Darth Vader. He is a pretty good antagonist for a trilogy, and actually he's even a pretty good character despite being created by George Lucas. He is the main threat in the first two movies. We won't talk about the Emperor, he is just Ozai's predecessor. And keep in mind, the antagonist being intimidating and clever isn't the equivalent of being well written. Or maybe give a teeny tiny thematic value to the hero and villain's conflict like KOTOR 1. I can argue that you can create pure devils and they still function as the perfect antagonist for your story, but that needs its own video, so I'm not going to talk about that. Just a means to an end doesn't justify anything. And many of these cliches are either justified by something like baby picture or haven't been justified at all. Please have balance. Balance is a fucking theme in Avatar. You are the writers of Avatar. Have it. Anyway, don't throw comedy in serious thematic climax. Please. The Great Divide was one of my favorite episodes, until the last 4 minutes at least. It's a pretty good exploration of the cultural difference, changes in history, and more importantly, point of view. Avatar is a good versus evil show. So when you have an episode that none of the tribes are pure evil, but not angels too, and both of them think they are right, you have done enough for your show when it's about different perspectives in a show that its target audience is 10-year-olds and kids, until the last part came. The problem is that rather than a serious explanation for those two tribes' differences, we get something that looks like a joke rather than a real event. Don't place comedy in a thematic climax. It's not just Avatar. Many shonen anime don't have balance between their comedy and serious stuff. But just because shonen anime often do this, it doesn't mean you should do the same shit. And before I start to complain, I need to tell you that you can blend in comedy with serious stuff and still have effective structure. Want examples? I admit it. Sometimes the comedy is a very good contrast to the dark themes and dark atmosphere, but sometimes it's really stupid. Okay? I can't really get that. Why a joke for a fucking thematic climax? Why? I know it is strange to create a section for Jet Alone, but I can explain why I'm doing this. See, we all know that Avatar's target audience is actually kids and young teenagers, although it has no limitation for older people watching it, but its target audience is still kids, and Jet, in his first appearance, is a character that we can arguably say is more than just kids show type antagonist. Although, anti-hero, antagonist, anything, I don't care. See, Jet hates Fire Nation people as a whole, considering that they killed his parents, but also in a brief scene argues that victory requires sacrifices, which can be considered utilitarianism, and its presence in a kids show is admirable. Sure, it isn't a deep dive in utilitarianism and the conclusion is the ends don't justify the means, but Jet is still a solid antagonist for one episode, and arguably he is more like an anti-hero rather than a villain. That's why I think most of us were happy when we saw him in book 2. To be honest, I think they placed him in book 2 because he was a good character. But there are several problems with him in book 2. See, at first he says he has done some horrible things in the past and he has changed. The problem is we didn't see that change. Jet changed off screen, because if the character is changing, the point of that change is for the viewer to understand and see that change. You can't have a payoff without setup. So what's the point of that change? Which I think all of us are agree that the well-known rule of show don't tell would have worked much better here. There are instances of tell don't show which work much better, Monogatari, but it's arguably both harder to execute well and not that much appropriate for Jet's case. And not just here. Wouldn't it be better to show us their problems too rather than tell us with just 2 lines of dialogue? You think with 2 lines of dialogue I would sympathize with a person who literally didn't care about her brother being hostage? It reminds me of the way that Yusuke Keishi thinks I would care about his characters because they can scream and cry. Although that dude did a way more poor job at character development than Avatar, so don't think about it. Although most of the things are pretty good before bossing Se in my opinion. Jet and Zuko steal some food, and Jet's speech about outcasts need to look after each other is a pretty good setup for a good character development for both Zuko and Jet, and maybe even Longshot and Smellerbee. But it seems that the writers had other plans for these characters. Rather than creating a relationship between Jet and Zuko, the writers make him understand Zuko and Iroh are firebenders in a few episodes later. And then Jet switches to his past all Fire Nation people are bad, especially firebenders attitude. It seems his off-screen change of heart doesn't include firebenders. Wouldn't it be better to create a good relationship between Jet and Zuko rather than throwing Jet out of the window a few episodes later? You could make Jet come to know Iroh and Zuko are firebenders in any time. So why you don't give the relationship depth and then give us a fight between Jet and Zuko? In this fight, they are almost strangers, and after this fight, they don't meet each other at all. And Jet is thrown out of the window after a few episodes and never gets mentioned again. Even Avatar itself jokes about him.
No! Jet! What did they do to you?
Did Jet just die? You know, it was really unclear.
I don't know about you, but I prefer character development over than Jin Jang Cabal's sword dude fighting with Zuko. Azula is undoubtedly a better antagonist than Ozai, I'm not going to deny that, but considering that most of her screen time in season 2 is about her being intimidating, cool and smart, and a total jerk over and over, what we get of her character is more how she is, rather than why she is like that. In Zuko's case, we get many foreshadows to his past, and after a few episodes we get to completely understand him. And in season 2 we get a massive development for Iroh and Zuko. We already know what a person Zuko is, and that's why most of our time with him is either why he is the person he is, or we get character development for him. That's the problem with Azula.
I don't have sob stories like all of you. I could sit here and complain how our mom liked Zuko more than me, but I don't really care.
I think as a writer you should understand that even if the character herself doesn't want to tell us about her past and motivations, we as the viewer want to know her past and have the right to know her past, right?
My own mother thought I was a monster. She was right, of course, but it still hurt.
But no, we don't get that much of her character in the whole show. In season 2, she is the intimidating monster, and when the show tries to give us any characterization other than being intimidating, cool and smart genius, it's already season 3. And even there we have an inhuman genius rather than the broken teenager that the show gives us in the second half of the third season. Mind you, if Avatar was just a short show or a movie, I wouldn't have problems with the villain's main characterization point being placed in the end. But Avatar isn't such a show, and Azula isn't such a character. He was present from the season 2. Other than this scene, we only have a few other scenes like the beach scene and Mai and Tylee's betrayal. You can count them on your fingers. Basically, she doesn't have as much depth that Iroh and Zuko got, because unlike them, her time was more about her being an inhuman monster rather than a character that is going to be explored. And that's not the only problem. In many scenes that Azula is present because she's too perfect, smart and powerful, and because the writers want to maintain that image, the writers need to do some stupid things for story to progress. Like this.
Set our course for home, Captain.
Home.
You heard the princess! Raise the anchors! We're taking the prisoners home!
Like this scene, that the reason Zuko and Iroh escape is because this man is so stupid. Or Tylee choosing a 14-year-old girl rather than Long Feng, the person who was their master for many years. To depict Azula as this perfect monster who never makes mistakes, the writers often depict other characters as complete idiots. Do these characters have a monkey's brain or what? This not just makes some very stupid scenarios, but also makes the distance between Azula and humanity further and further. That's why the only part that we can consider Azula has really been shocked and confused is Mai and Tylee's betrayal. Just one scene. It isn't enough, for me at least. Also, I don't know about you, but considering that Zuko and Iroh prefer risk of death over than Azula.
If the Earth Kingdom discovers us, they'll have us killed.
But if the Fire Nation discovers us, we'll be turned over to Azula.
Earth Kingdom it is.
And Zuko has already proven that Iroh is even more important than capturing Aang.
The Avatar. Now would you please put on some clothes?
The fact that Azula, the person they prefer to risk their own lives,
Earth Kingdom it is,
but don't get captured by her, is the person who convinces Zuko to betray Iroh, is really weird for me. Zuko already had many reasons for not listening to Azula and siding with Iroh. My problem is that it's Azula who tries to convince Zuko, and he succeeds. Why the fuck he would even listen to her? Why would he even think about it? It was already established that Azula is crazy and should be stopped.
I know what you're gonna say. She's my sister and I should be trying to get along with her.
No, she's crazy and she needs to go down.
So how Zuko is convinced by Azula? I can't understand that. Because she's so intimidating and genius and smart and I don't give a shit. I'm done. I can't understand it anymore. Disclaimers. This part is mostly the result of a very sick mind who loves to over-explore the thematic side of things. If you don't give a shit about Avatar's themes and just like it as your favorite action-packed adventure drama, I doubt part 8 over-analyzing be interesting to you. So feel free to skip to the afterword if you want. I sometimes hear that some people say Avatar is a kids show, so it doesn't need to have any theme, message, philosophy or anything at all, which is stupid to be honest. It seems people often misinterpret complexity with depth. You don't need to explore the most complex philosophies and mental issues like suicide, real freedom, modern life problems, society, or something like that for your show to have depth in it. I think I need to remind you that many of the most important things a human needs for living is simple things. When you don't have the ability to understand these simple basics, how can you understand more complex themes? Avatar has already explored some good themes for its own demographic and audience. It even has a pretty solid episode of The Ends Don't Justify the Means. PM, not that I agree with dictating what's right or wrong to the audience, but well, it's better than giving them stupid philosophical bullshits without real setup, payoff, and logic. So don't give me bullshits like you can't complain about the themes. Avatar is just a kids show. This isn't Rick and Morty I'm criticizing. It's Avatar. And the next problem is that you can't separate Eastern martial arts from philosophy. And the show is in an Eastern fantasy setting with martial arts. It even uses some of that philosophy here and there. It's not non-existent.
It is important to draw wisdom from many different places. If we take it from only one place, it becomes rigid and stale. Understanding others, the other elements, and the other nations will help you become whole.
I would have liked to see Gyatso's training with Aang too, though. A stomach is the source of power and energy in Aikido, a Japanese martial art, just like what Iroh is saying in his lecture. I don't know if it's directly referring to Aikido, considering that it is also about redirecting power and using your opponent's move against them, but whatever. That's not what I'm here to talk about. So it has its own themes. Just because it doesn't appeal to some big brains doesn't mean it doesn't have any. Now let us come to discuss one of the most annoying thematic problems in Avatar. And before coming and starting to argue with me in this part about, oh, you just don't understand the religious and cultural undertones of Avatar, I should say that I live in a country where it's heavily affected by religion, which in its history had many things to do with India, aka the country that Buddhism and Hinduism originated from. Which means I have enough resources to at least understand Avatar's cultural and religious themes. And for the record, I was born in Asia. I'm not just a fucking third party who shits on this part because he quote unquote doesn't understand it. I shit on it exactly because I understand it. And at last, you run away. You are too scared of losing things that you even don't try. You think if you love someone you lose them, you don't have the guts to protect them, so you just run away, saying they are attachments, and the same stupid bullshit of attachments are bad that we heard millions of times. That's the failure of nomads. You must not run away. Face it head on. You might get hurt, you might suffer, but it's your choice. Die in a stupid mountain where no one mourns you, or have a life of suffering that fills your soul. Those stupids who love to stay empty, shallow, and worthless can be what they want. But if they have the least sense of respect, don't criticize what you can't do, just because others can. And that's the part that Avatar's thematic values twist in a stupid way. The part that pissed me off even more than any plot hole. This living scumbag is Gyatso's friend. What the fuck? Now hold on. There is a teeny tiny little problem here. If we are going to assume Patik's character based on his design, he looks too similar to Indian Hindus. Now there is another problem. Who exactly is this man? Where he lives, where did he come from, and most importantly, how can a caring person like Gyatso, who values Aang's decisions and individuality and his wishes, be a friend of this man? It's like comparing Moriya Oshiba and Miyamoto Musashi just because they both were born in Japan and were martial artists. These two are polar opposites by the information that we are given in the show. Let us remember all of the core themes that were in Avatar before this scumbag.
Follow your passion, Zuko, and life will reward you.
protecting those who you love, learning from mistakes, accepting the reality. These are all normal themes, basic information for living, and it's completely fine. Avatar is created for kids. You can't expect something like, I don't know, criticizing utilitarianism or something. Oh, but wait, Avatar did that too.
You will never find balance if you deny this part of your life.
But you will find balance exactly from denying one of the most important parts of a person's life. It's called passion, you dumbass. People's dreams and wishes are more valuable than so many things, including your stupid lesson about attachment, my dear friend. Before saying what is the problem with the existence of one of the most important philosophies in East, i.e. #attachment's bad, in a show about kids, we should at first understand what the fuck is philosophy. I have mentioned earlier that Eastern martial arts is inseparable from philosophy. Example, the basic knowledge you need for really learning Kung Fu is just two things. Know yourself, know your opponent. The basic philosophy of Aikido is about love, peace, and balance. Love in general, actually. Ai in Japanese means balance, love, and even sorrow. Please remember that Mori Oshiba, the founder of Aikido, never limited the love. At least I couldn't find any evidence for him doing that. Paternal, universal, platonic, romantic, it doesn't matter at all. All of them are a form of love. And although I'm a very extreme postmodernist, it isn't about me being completely disagree with the ancient philosophy of ancient hikikomoris. And yes, I literally called this scumbag hikikomori. But it isn't about my philosophy. It is about the show's portrayal of this philosophy. And unfortunately, this philosophy is in contradiction with almost all of the previous episodes' themes. Even Aang can tell that it is stupid.
Why would I choose cosmic energy over Katara? How could it be a bad thing that I feel an attachment to her? 3 chakras ago, that was a good thing. 3 chakras ago, that was a good thing.
Well done, my boy. But it seems that Patik is disagree. Patik sensei, can you tell us what are your reasons for the cliche belief of attachments bad?
Learn to let her go, or you cannot let the pure cosmic energy flow in from the universe.
And then I thought Lucas sucks at giving us reasons for attachments bad bullshit in the Star Wars. Sorry Lucas, you're better than this. Philosophy is based on logic. Okay? Logic. Not cosmic energy, nor fear and idiocy. You need to prove your philosophy with logic, not a space magic, I'm looking at you Lucas, and power and control. And the writers are saying this scumbag is Gyatso's friend. Until what we saw of Gyatso, he wasn't the person to let go of Aang for any reason.
I'm not going to let them take you away from me. Aang?
How these two are friends? And more importantly, do you even know this attachment's bad philosophy comes from where? Do you know where it comes from? If you do, then skip to this part of the video. If not, I will give you a brief summary. Attachments can be weak spots and weaknesses. If I lose the person X, I can't live anymore. I should get money, power, control, many things to protect them. What if I lose them? What if I fail to protect them? It can cause stress and fear. You might become nervous, you might get angry, your mind might get burned, you might get hurt. So you just need to don't have any. Don't care about other people for who they are. You don't need to know them. Just show everyone love. It doesn't really matter who, you just need to love everyone and the whole existence. Just accept, if you don't have anyone, then you won't lose them. And by showing everyone affection, you will not become a sad, depressed person. It's pretty simple, right? Just need to react to everything evenly. It's the best solution. Or is it? In Eastern philosophy, there are many reasons for not loving a person in a real way, i.e. loving them for the person they are, not because they are just another human being. Religion, fairness, don't wanting to get hurt, and such reasons. Buddha says you should let go of your attachments to have peace of mind. That's why I called Guru Patik ancient hikikomori. You don't work, you don't have anyone, you don't have any real interactions with anyone, you are weak and don't want to get hurt, you can't fight for what you want, so you just go up a mountain and sit in cross-shaped and escape from human world and suffering with the excuse of divine. You have food, you have nature, clean air, no one will ever argue with you, rob you, steal from you, trick you, lie to you, you get the idea. I don't see much difference between a hikikomori and a false divine man, i.e. a coward. Keep in mind, don't caring about others because you are confident, and don't wanting to care about anything because you are too afraid of getting hurt are two separate things. Measuring everything evenly and being an extreme pacifist are something to be criticized on its own, but this isn't a philosophy critic, it's a critic about the show. Anyway, not only Patrick's philosophy is so contradicting with Gyatso's portrayal in the first season with the show's themes and never was present until this exact moment in the show at all, it also doesn't explain why such a philosophy exists, even doesn't back it up. It doesn't need to shit all over it like I did, just fucking explain if you are using it. You put something in your show that is too deep for a kid to understand, don't even explain it, even in a minimalistic way, justify it with a stupid space cosmic bullshit, and then you throw it out of the window by the end of this season. It never gets mentioned at all. Aang gets fucked because of physical attack, i.e. the lightning. Even though Avatar's mind state is something internal, not external, and by the end of the show he kisses Katara, even though he's still the Avatar and still is able to go to the Avatar state. He didn't give a fuck about Patik's bullshit and got back his Avatar state with a rock. What the fuck is this? Also, keep in mind, Aang was supposed to not be able to go into Avatar state.
You won't be able to go into the Avatar state at all.
And then he just saves the world, even though he's still in love with Katara and kisses her. And if you want to tell me you can't add more complex themes in your show if it's for kids, let me introduce you to Hayao Miyazaki's works, especially Spirited Away. A child can easily enjoy that movie, and it has complex cultural messages about Japan and the stuff that a child might not get, but a more grown-up person, for example a 16 to 18 person, maybe gets with a bit searching in Google. Now, there is a counter-argument that I have heard about this part, which some say that's the point. Patik was wrong, but the problem is not that I disagree with Patik's philosophy, although I am. And it was added to the show. I am disagree with Deisho Kaiki's philosophy in Monogatari season 2 too. Why I don't criticize that? You said because it's made in Japan? No, completely wrong, because it's explored and explained and isn't thrown out of the window after that arc and isn't in contradiction with the viewer's expectations from this character, i.e. Patik being the friend of a caring person like Gyatso, so he should understand what real love is, and caring about someone else and don't letting them die when they are in danger is not a bad thing or illogical, and certainly Patik doesn't have the stupid but still illogical dialogue of Yoda in Star Wars.
If you honor what they fight for, yes.
And Kaiki's philosophy isn't contradicting with the show's main theme, which is about the way that different people react to their problems and try to solve them. Kaiki's philosophy has a fantastic setup, it is explored, it is explained with logic, not a space magic and cosmic energy, it isn't thrown out of the window. That's the problem I have with Patik's existence. He is just there. He is there. He is even more worthless than an Easter egg. Iroh was disagree with his bullshits too, but remember that Iroh is a well-established character that mourns and respects his son, loves his nephew, and has made his mistakes long ago, and has so much experience. Iroh being disagree with that scumbag is not strange nor wrong at all, but you should explore different ideals when they are presented in your show, with logic, not 2 lines of dialogues, which don't make even any sense. Just don't be ashamed of exploring and explaining what you add to the story, and don't throw it out of the window. Pretty simple, right? So don't say it's not possible to add complex themes to the story, because it is. The problem is that Guru Patik's existence is thrown out of the window.
Chakras! Chakras! Everybody loves chakras! 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 Chakra sandwich is good! Yum!
That doesn't count without even being explored 15 minutes. Almost 2 episodes. Just 2 episodes. Don't add something in your show if you don't want to explain/explore it, and more so if it's contradicting with your show's themes. Even Aang understood Patik's philosophy is contradicting. It doesn't matter even if this is one of the most important ancient philosophies in East. Don't fucking use this when you don't want to add depth to it. You can't expect me to don't tell a layer you just shit all over it doesn't smell badly, because it does. And with throwing this theme out of the window, i.e. Patik never being mentioned again and justifying Avatar state's loss and regaining with lightning and rock, which are external provocations that should not be used for justifying mind state and internal problems, you just made everything worse.
How did he say all that without taking a breath?
And the problem is, it is not the only time that the writers justify their themes with bullshit reasons like cosmic energy and such stuff. Oh god, how long is this gonna become? If you want to know what I consider to be a good exploration of the idea of #attachments bad, you can play Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2. There is a character in KOTOR 1 that the game explores these themes with him that you can get what I mean by exploring this philosophy. Both are good versus evil stories, both are about saving the world, a team of heroes going to stop a terrible asshole, etc, etc. Avatar is undoubtedly a nostalgic show for those who live in US. It is even a nostalgic show for me too, considering that I watched it when I was a kid. But when I look back at it and remember the new experiences that I had in years since watching it, I can't help but say I don't really like Avatar that much. And it's not because I think it's just for kids or that it isn't interesting, but because I really think it is a show that you can love. But that's just my opinion. Let us remember that we don't need to choke each other to death for our opinions being at least understood, and I certainly didn't create this video to create a war in the comment section, although I certainly joked about creating a war. Anyway, thank you for watching the video. I look forward to our next meeting. Until then, stay safe.
Happy birthday, my son. If only I could have helped you. Leaves from the vine, falling so slow, like fragile, tiny shells drifting in the foam. Little soldier boy, come marching home. Brave soldier boy comes marching home.